evening to all the audience around the globe. I extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you for this wonderful event. My name is Avani Gurjar, and I'm a senior impact manager at Idobro Impact Solutions. I would like to welcome all our panelists and thank you all of you for joining us today for this event, taking the time out. And Sharmari will be our moderator. So I hand it over to you, Sharmari. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Avani. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's lovely to see such a expert panel on responsible tourism to handle today's topic of promoting responsible for a better tomorrow. So tourism is so integrated. I think this is an excellent panel that brings that the essence of integration with the community, the nature, the people, their smiles, environment, everything that surrounds us. Tourism cannot be cut away from what's happening around us. So this discussion touches upon very, very important elements, starting with community empowerment with tourism, creative arts, performing culture, festivals, and I'm sure that also connects local community, conserving fragile landscapes, and tourism's responsibility with regard to that. Then ESG, something called environment engineering ESG. I'm sure it must be capturing, calculating, and also reporting. And then finally, we have Dr. Philip, who will talk about political implications in tourism development. So the order that we have today, I would like to start with something which is really, really important. That's our local communities. I think there's huge nexus now to go in search of helping local communities in tourism development, not to keep them away like we did in the past. So impetus is now on involving them much more. So the first panelist I will invite to Ms. Manisha Pandey, who is the Managing Director of Village Ways and also the Founder Director of International Center for Responsible Tourism Foundation in India, to start the discussion with this community engagement, how she set up Village Ways and her experience for over 20 years. Thank you, Manisha.
Thank you, Sharmari. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here today and share this panel and also be moderated by you. So I would like to say that it's a very interesting topic today, and we have a very diverse panelist list, as you said. So it will be very interesting to hear everyone else. So while I can start with what the experience that we've been involved with for the last, as you said, about 20 plus years now with community-based tourism. So it is more like I think coming together, a very fortunate coincidence of people coming together to do something for the livelihood generation of 5 villages in a very remote location in the hill state of Uttarakhand in India. And the overall experience was how we could help the communities around small hotel that we were running as a family place, which we were running for many years. And we were observing that many villages were actually in the verge of out-migration, and that there was a serious threat of out-migration because the main reason was that there was lack of livelihood sources. And this being a wildlife protected area, there were many challenges for the communities who were living inside the sanctuary. So a very thoughtful process was how we could build into a community venture where we could involve the wider community rather than restricting it maybe to a family or just few individuals in the communities. And this is a rural rural setting. So, mainly the specialization for our work started from there onwards into rural areas. The primary goal for this project was how we could stop the outmigration, and the second goal was how we could generate livelihood for that purpose. And the only and very clear objective which was linked to what we were doing was tourism. So at that point in time, to be very honest with you, I had perhaps not very specific background of responsible tourism, or knowing much about how it impacts a community. But we had adopted a policy of responsible tourism because of being in touch with some of the specialists from rural tourism and responsible tourism arena, like Dr. Harold Goodwin, luckily, who was with us at that time as a part of the team. So, uh, over the years, when we developed it as a community tourism model, we were not we did study the model of having a homestay, which is commonly heard even now. And I think the definition, to be honest, is also being lost, because we really don't know what a homestay even now means. And at that point, there were very few reference points for us to learn and to understand how to go about this whole venture. But what we surely realized is something to be sustainable needs at least a venture which is community owned, where the entire village is involved in some way or the other, so that the benefit sharing model is that it's a widespread benefit model where communities can provide a service related to tourism. And then we developed the community guest houses, which were set up in all these 5 villages, which are community owned and run. And we also provided them with trainings. That was one side. And then, of course, we also linked them to the market, because always the challenge, when you talk about any tourism model, is when you talk about linking the certain things to market, because unless there's a marketing linkage, no project on ground can succeed. So, with the help of our co-founders who were there with us, like Richard and Keith and Graham from UK, who were helping us with the marketing side as well as the development side. So we were able to link these enterprises to the market. Finally, it has to be market driven. But what was most significant, coming to the main crux of this conversation, is that what was most significantly noted is through a very small venture of responsible tourism, where we involved the entire community to run something and own something collectively. There was not
Yes,
just a
Alisha.
model. Yes.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. That's exactly the question that I'm going to ask you. Since your 5 minutes is up, every speaker will get 5 minutes to explain. You've been dealing with this community for 20 years and community based. How do you keep them together? How do you survive for such a long time with the community? Because I see it like from the NGO or development sector, I see the projects mushrooming and then they disappear after through 3-4 years. Now, can you share some experience about how you have been successful in keeping it together and growing it?
So I think the main reason for having this handholding for many years is because I think any community project or any such initiative which has to be taken, it needs a certain period of handholding. And that means that the community needs that support for a longer period. Whilst every time there's an expectation that a project can take off very quickly and the results can be shown very quickly, I think the main focus has to be that this will be a long process. It will have no shortcuts. And the only reason I think we have also been able to do that is it's never a case that there are no challenges. There's every year there
Mm.
will be challenges related to working with community, especially when you're bringing them together. But how you cope with this is giving them handling for a longer period, so that you bring them to auto mode only after a certain number of years, when you're totally confident that the community is educated now to understand that that tourism can also bring dangers to their village, to their area, and therefore how they have to cope with those, avoiding those dangers to come to the community. I think that's where we will say that this is an auto mode. So
If
I think that, yeah.
if there is a rough estimate of somebody like you, who like somebody else who gets inspired to set up a project in the rural villages, how long would they have to, like this, you said there's a minimum period of this long. How long is it? Is it how many years roughly
See, I would
to?
say that to any new projects that we've been doing, now we are working with over 30 villages across India and in even in Nepal. And I think I would say a minimum I would always say is a 5 year period, which we have
Hmm.
assessed for all the recent government projects that we are involved with. We feel that 5 years will at least give you a point where you can say that you can hand over perhaps your project to another responsible organization who can maybe provide them with the right kind of audience and the right kind of travelers who should come to the villages, and equally it will maybe make the community more aware about what is good and bad for them, so that nobody else needs to keep nurturing it. Yeah, so minimum
Yes.
5 years.
So there is no shortcuts,
No.
isn't it, Manisha? So excellent story, Manisha. You have not been able to describe all your work, and I'm sure if everybody goes on to village base and find out exactly what a lot of work they're doing, that will be much better, because this is such a short time to tell all about you've been doing and all the global awards you've been winning. Then I would like to move on to another very connected item to the community, about performing culture, creative culture, arts, crafts. Rashmini Darwani. Hi, Rashmini. Rashmi, co-founder of Artix Company, specializing in cultural sector focused on strategy, audience development, and research. She will speak on creative arts, cultural performances, which plays a huge part of tourism. That is one of the major draws that tourism depends on. And that's also a major approach of sending tourism dollars, tourism income to the local communities. Thank you, Rashmi. Your turn now.
Thank you so much, Armory, and thank you to Rise Worldwide as well for this opportunity. I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, you just need to give me a second. I will warn you though. I think there must have been a request for screen share. Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
I've accepted it, yeah.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen? Because I can't see the window anymore.
Yes, we can see.
Excellent. It's just loading. Apologies. So I'm mindful of the time. I'll run through this very quick, but I thought it was important to give you some context of the work that we do across arts and culture festivals and consultancy around them, but also bring out some critical case studies to explain how sustainability can play out in the arts and culture and the festival space, and especially events management. So I'm just going to take you through a few areas of context. We've assumed knowledge about sustainability. So I'd like to start off with a little bit of a definition to remind us what sustainability is, which is avoiding the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance. Renoting the words natural resources, depletion, and to maintain an ecological balance, and how this idea is carried forward in events and festivals. I'd like to give you a context of sustainability in its entirety, of which the kind of sustainability that we are talking about is a part of it. So when we think sustainability, sustainability also tends to be a luxurious choice. For a lot of people, they can't afford to be sustainable given the contexts of affordability of material that we are talking about. So when we think of sustainability, we think of sustainability in totality when it comes to art and culture. And the core tends to be the social, financial, environmental, and cultural sustainability, and then the diffused notion of sustainability, which percolates in other areas of your work, whether it's business models or communities, education, funding, production. When we're looking at the kind of sustainability that you and I are talking about today, we can sort of look at these areas, right? Environmental sustainability, which has relationships with the social aspect of sustainability, communities, and education around sustainability, consumption, production, funding, like I mentioned, is expensive, but also networks. And I wanted to sort of bring all of this in to give you a context of a few case studies as well, but just to give you a little bit of a context of what we have been doing. We've been working with the festival space for almost 5 years now, with the arts and culture sector much longer. We run a platform called Festivals from India, and we've run a series of events with British Council called Festival Connections. We've had in-depth conversations with this ecosystem that creates and curates these beautiful experiences for thousands of people who pay a decent money and also don't pay. They come in for free. So how do you create notions of sustainability and context of sustainability with these communities? How do you look at everything from audience behavior change to procurement of materials? An example of some of the events that we've done in the past to talk through different notions of sustainability, whether it was gig workers or freelance workers during COVID, digital futures, looping back was our session on designing eco-friendly festivals, and also just checking how festivals are doing. How do we look at the health of festivals in its entirety, and how does sustainability come in? This is the platform that we run. Okay, the aspects of sustainability at culture festivals, we look at 4 areas of work. One is local. So what kind of local ecosystem impact is an event or a festival having? And a local area impact that a festival is having. So if I'm expecting 100,000 people to come to a ecologically sensitive area like the Zero Valley in Andhra Pradesh, which is where the Zero Festival is there, you have to keep in mind what kind of ecosystem impact it will have in the area. If I have a festival in Ladakh, there is not enough water there to take care of that many people. So how does it impact those areas? Of course, on a global level, you're talking about travel and transport, power, procurement, solid waste and recycling, water waste, all the supporting documents and organization you need to make this happen. If there are legal compliances around sustainability, carbon footprint, health and safety, audience surveys, everything that you need to build in the aspect of sustainability into the organizing of the activity and event. And finally, external reach and behavioral change. What does the event do beyond the event? How does it continue to preach sustainability after the event is over? How does it share its practices of sustainability with other festivals or the industry or supporting causes? Here are some examples of, I wanted to point out 2 particular areas. One was travel and transport and the other is procurement. So a little bit of information on how transport impacts sustainability. And of course, with tourism, transport is a big contributor. So how do we understand local impact and global impact? So in sort of talking to festivals, we sort of look at, okay, local impact could be air pollution, noise, water pollution, but a global impact is global warming. What is the flight miles that you're looking at when people are coming into a city to attend a festival? And how do you measure that? Just an example is, I don't know how many of you have heard of this festival called Lollapalooza. I cannot see any of you, so I don't know if any of you are raising hands or smiling, but
I think your time is up, but continue. We'll just give you a little.
I'll take another 30 seconds. So just
Yeah, sure.
Lollapalooza as an example. So what they've done is it's also good event management practice to not cause traffic congestion. So they have worked with the Mumbai bus ecosystem as well as the train ecosystem to hire special trains for the travelers, for the revelers to come in via that and not add to road transport. Of course, from a waste management perspective, talking about as a litter-free or a zero waste festival on, avoiding using single-use plastic. These are things that festivals of that sort will do. This is another festival, one of the oldest high-quality music festivals in India, Weekender, and this is their reporting on sustainability management. So, how do they audit how much of waste has avoided going into the landfill? How much of it was recyclable waste? How is biodegradable waste recycled, etc. Just some images to give you a sense of how it plays out. Procurement was another, and we can sort of dip into it in our conversation, but I just wanted to stop there, and I'm happy to share parts of this presentation with you. We also help festivals understand which are the areas where you can assess sustainability, common areas of concern, how can you look at going greener. So education even at or with festivals to how to do this better. I'm going to stop there because my time is up.
Thank
And
you.
if someone can ensure that my screen is stopped in terms of sharing.
And then you can see us all again back.
Hopefully.
Yes. Okay. Rashmi, my question is, it's all wonderful because some tourists say, okay, we come to a destination. What is there? Like sometimes we stay in a hotel for 7 days and then we go away. But what can we do? What can we see? What are the entertainments that you have? And then sometimes they don't want to see the same ritual or the dance. Now, if for an example in Sri Lanka, we wouldn't have had our traditional dancing in existence today if not for tourism. So there are like tourism helps to preserve disappearing arts and crafts. Can you mention anything in particular related to India? How you have helped a festival featuring something very unique, bringing about something that was not there, or highlighting a dying art or craft or something really unique. Thank you, Rashmi.
Shamari, I mean, honestly, it's a very difficult question to answer because you don't have 48 hours for me to respond to this. The point is, I think it's an embarrassment of riches. There is enough and more in this country when it comes to uniqueness. But it's also about how the uniqueness of tradition is being retranslated and reinterpreted for contemporary times. And I can give you examples ranging from something like the Serendipity Art Festival in Goa, which I think is one of the best festivals I have seen in the last decade or so coming out of India, multi-arts festival. And in fact, we did an impact analysis for the festival as well about 4 years ago, where we didn't assess environmental impact, but we assessed social, economic, and cultural impact. And the impact has been right from the way of how they've encouraged new art forms to respond to traditional spaces. So, for instance, that they have commissioned architects to think about looking at an old dilapidated building owned by the government and reimagining that as a new exhibition space. Or they have commissioned artists to work with the local Goan heritage of flora and fauna and reimagine content around that to create a different idea of sustainability or understanding of sustainability or ecology, saving the ecology, so to speak. They do mangrove walkthroughs as a part of events.
Right.
They have done music. Sorry, I'll just finish this point. They've done music concerts on boats to talk about polluted water. So there are ways in which you can sort of bring in uniqueness even with something more traditional, but it's interpretation that can come through the creativity of the arts ecosystem and the artists.
Yes. So thank you, Rashmi. So what we've learned from your explanation is there's something unique that you're doing that is not only promoting traditional arts, but you are creating these unique spaces that tourism attracts, maybe a site, the dilapidated site, and getting the performers to go there. So that's a link that you are actually helping the performers plus the site regenerate the site
so
as
we
well.
aren't, but the ecosystem is, the cultural ecosystem in the sector is. What we are doing is bringing a spotlight to that and helping them understand the patterns of positive contribution of the sector towards sustainability.
So that can be a multiplier effect. Thank you so much.
Very strong multiplier effect.
Yes.
Thanks.
Moving on to Dr. Sanjeev. Hi, Sanjeev. How are you? He's going to explain to us about fragile ecosystems. And I'm sure those are the areas with most outstanding views and beauty. Sanjeev is going to talk about conserving those fragile landscape plus giving community benefits through tourism. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thanks, Sharmari. Thanks to the organizer for inviting me, and it's a really, really very interesting topic of my heart. And so I'll just quote with statistics by WTTC. As for the data of 2022, tourism sector at the global GDP contributing 7.6%, which is actually 22% against 2021, which is huge, more than 3 million new jobs created through tourism. So probably tourism is one of the sectors which is actually contributing to all the 17 SDGs of the UN. This question of environmental conservation at the critical fragile ecosystem is really very tough, but we did demonstrated in one of the landscapes, which I am just going to share you. So basically, environmental conservation at the critical fragile ecosystem is an essential element to conserve the local biodiversity and ecosystem services. Tourism as one of the ecosystem services. So statistical analysis actually says sustainable tourism practices not only conserve the biodiversity, but also it enhance the socio-economic prosperity of the local community. I'll just connect what Manisha told about the mountain states, about the community empowerment and participation for the sustainability of the tourism sector. So I'll just quote one example in the East Coast state, that is Odisha, which is the village is called Mangalajodi, which is part of Chilka Lagoon, which is the largest brackish water lagoon in Asia. It's a Ramsar site and also an important bird area. So the village is having a fantastic wetland ecosystem, but the fragility realized 2 decades back when the villagers were actually engaged in poaching the birds, both the resident as well as the migratory birds, and selling the eggs on the roadside dhabas. The whole ecosystem was damaged and also the village was defamed. It's a story of complete transformation of human beings and also the story of conservation, community conservation in place. So it's an interconnection between the local ecosystem as well as the local community where conservation played a critical role. So when we actually started the program, tried to incentivize those efforts where the community actually earned money from poaching the birds, which is actually very bad to that ecosystem as well as for the village because it already defamed their cultural richness of the village. So while we started the consultation processes and the village engagement with the community, so a lot of resistance happened, but we moved towards the community conservation as a critical role, where we tried to incentivize, where we actually used tourism as a vehicle to conserve the landscape as well as providing sustainable livelihoods for the local community. So once the local community having realized the fact that they are incentivized through the ecotourism services, whether it is the guided bird watching or local homestay in the village, local kitchens, and all these things actually integrated in the packaging and we positioned in such a way so that the local community engaged meaningfully and on the dignified livelihoods from those efforts. And what the actually result is, so they have actually conserved the outcomes, particularly the conserved the wetland of 15 square kilometer. Not only they preserve the wetland ecosystem, but also at least they're having 200 plus households gainfully engaged in the livelihoods through tourism services. So it's a story of change, and it happened with a lot of patience capital we did because it's more than a decade long interventions where we actually connected the local stakeholders, the Chilika Development Authority, local forest department, for the community conservation initiative that includes the patrolling of the landscape, sighting, and also not to have the poaching, so a lot of awareness building actions, capacity building training and exposures happened in the cities. And then the local stakeholders, including the district administration and many others, actually joined hand. And that happened in a way that the community realized the values of dignified well-being and also the migration restricted because the youth migrated to many other cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad and others. So they also realize the fact if we are getting the livelihoods at the village, so why don't we actually participate in the conservation? It's a collective action. It's like a mission to realize, mission to make mindset. So the learning from the things actually, if we actually sure about the sustainable tourism practices, following the responsibility of the local host community and the local stakeholders, definitely the travelers will follow that path. So
Yes, thank you.
first
Thank you,
step.
Dr. Sanjay. Your time is up. Very interesting, and I'm sure this time is not at all enough to share the entire story or even give a good understanding of it. My question to you is, these are fragile, um, biodiverse, and maybe areas that indigenous or local communities live. Have you ever thought about carrying capacity? I'm sure now you want more and more tourists to come, but have you ever studied, or are you thinking about carrying capacity levels to these areas? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, Charmari. So basically, my view is in every tourism destination at the beginning, definitely there should have carrying capacity assessment of that area. And yes, we did. After having the whole tourism services in place, when we see that the village, the destination is actually going popular day by day, and though we actually targeted to the segmental tourists like the wildlife conservationists, bird watchers, and researchers, and wildlife photographers, but we cannot restrict to the mass. So, and again, the government of Odisha declared as a eco destinations, but assuming the concern of over tourism in future, during 2019-20, so we actually did a detailed carrying capacity assessment of that destination that includes the social, ecological, and carrying capacity of that wetland and the village. And based upon that, a lot of findings to start regulated tourism in place. On that context, actually, after setting of all those things, we have started layering of different actions one by one. So one of the carrying capacity assessment findings was the villagers at the catchment areas actually using chemicals in the agriculture, which is actually mixed with the wetland and water getting contaminated. Then we started a regenerative agriculture program in 13 catchment villages to make shift from chemical to non-chemical food production system. So it is happening. Second, for sustainability, the number of boats to be ply on day, and also the parking lot and everything actually. So we have started consultation with all the stakeholders to develop, design a self-regulated guidelines in place. So hopefully in coming days, so we'll able to design that guidelines so that the village community under the umbrella of Gram Panchayat will actually demonstrate the responsible tourism practices based on the carrying capacity.
Absolutely important. Thank you very much for that answer. And coming from the community itself to restrict number of boats going and maybe later on number of tourists entering certain areas. It's really important because over-visitation is something that we are seeing in Sri Lanka in one of the most famous wildlife parks. So that's important that you don't have enough visitors now. Maybe you are having under tourism, but still you would want to think about carrying capacity measures. Thank you very much for that.
Just to add on, Sarmari, just 1 minute. So basically, carrying capacity also gives us a sense that the water you usage or sourced there at the destination, the energy you actually utilize and source from these different things, and also the garbage you created at the destination, and so also the food sourced and produced. So all those elements also need to be taken care of while practicing the responsible tourism principle in place. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. The entire supply chain as well. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. Now we are moving on to something I hope is going to be a little bit high tech. It's a buzzword. ESG is a buzzword in corporate sector. Next invitation is to Indranil, Seth Senior Manager, Responsible Business, ESG at Challenge Alliance, he will speak about his experience in environmental engineering, sustainability management, ESG for sustainable tourism. Thank you, Indranil. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Shanmari. Well, I come from the environmental background, mining and environmental. So I can, talk about how to destroy the planet and then get it reclaimed and, restored. City, that's actually what we should be talking about, because economic, environmental sustainability, social sustainability, um, and economic sustainability. These are the three types of sustainability should be taking we should be taking into account whenever we are talking about sustainable tourism. I mean, tourism, there can be a lot of greenwashing also. So you can have festivals and all, but the main thing is, even a small touristy place in some nondescript state, having can do very well in sustainability tourism, where they can involve the local tribals doing some sort of and I do remember Shanmani mentioning that how you can involve the locals in in your sustainability pursuit, where they economically they gain from the tourist dollars or tourist rupees. And also, and this is applicable to all of Asia or South Asian countries, where you involve the local culture and them to and that's happening in India, in North Bengal, in the Duas region. Whenever there are some jungle safaris in different parks there, the local tribals living in those jungles, they are made to do a lot of the traditional tribal dances for the tourists. So that is actually social sustainability as such. But then economic sustainability, you need to take into account, sorry, environmental sustainability, you need to take into account your footprint. So carbon footprint generated by every tourist who sets foot on the tourist place. So unfortunately, in South Asia, India also, what happens is, any place which gets famous, the carrying capacity is ignored, and most everybody is interested in the dollars that is coming in. So, for example, you have beaches like Puri or Goa or Mussoorie, or the hill stations. I mean, you see how rampant illegal construction happens, and how hoteliers can get licensed by bribing corrupt government officials. And they are, that's the thing. I mean, that's also part of being sustainable for tourism. I mean, you need to start from scratch. You need to have the infrastructure built in a way that it supports the sustainability, and then comes the behavior of the tourists, the information they can get, and how they can do their bit in supporting the sustainability of that area they are visiting. Be it the transport, the air travel, starting from their door of their home to the door of the hotel. So what is your footprint you're generating? So those things, the government also needs to either involve partners who can do those calculations and come up with maximum ceilings for this carrying capacity for these touristy areas, so that it's not a burden on the locals or the local government or the local partners. So this sort of approach is very important, where you take into account the calculations, and the and not just about the marketing of you need to do this. No, 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 because somebody has to take up the challenge for coming up with the numbers and saying, okay, this particulars, I mean, this is the capacity of this region, and this much tourists they can support. um, Other than that, as far as the environmental aspect goes, I would say, ESG, I will just touch upon it. ESG is mostly for corporates. I mean, it's through the SEBI mandate for corporates to have the 1,000 top listed corporates in Bombay Stock Exchange to have their annual reporting include their sustainability reports as well. So as a BRSR tool, that's a tool developed by certain agencies supported by the government. So this is in line with what ESG is being followed all over the world. I mean, ESG in Europe, in US, and in Far East Asia, ESG is becoming very, very important for corporates to go on. I mean, there is the cross-border carbon calculations. So these things are also happening as we speak. So ESG can also be applied to the tourism sector as well. Why not? I mean, you have environment, social, governance. So good environmental stewardship, good social awareness and responsibility, and good governance. So good governance can lead to good environment and social sustainability as well. So as such, the concept of ESG can be is also applicable to all I have to say.
Thank you, Indranesh. I think the spot on time is up. Now, I actually have two questions for you. One is you are dealing in responsible tourism, responsible business practices. For number one question is, how different is it tourism business is from other businesses? Is there a clear difference in tourism business when it comes to responsible tourism, responsible practices? So that's the number one question. Number two question is about climate change. I mean, for somebody in the rural villages, climate change might sound like rocket science. And I think we have declared climate emergency now. It's not about, it's something really, it's a burning issue. It's not a debate, it's for sure it's happening. So the second question is, how can the tourism business do a simple thing to reduce their carbon footprint? One simple thing. Maybe it can be to India or to general, to everybody else. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharmari, for your questions. First of all, I mean, tourism business, I'm not a business background person as such, but from my, from environmental perspective and from my background, I can say it's not much different from the traditional way of doing business. Business is business. So in tourism, you have a mass approach. So you are not just having, let's say there is some manufacturing, there you have a limited amount of a clientele, but in tourism it's unlimited. So your every tourist is your client, which is coming to that place, and all the stakeholders, the government, the hotels, the hotel management, and the even down to the person who's doing the sweeping on the streets and cleaning up the solid waste and taking care of the water resources, and in the hotel, the hotel boy who is making your bed. So that person is also a stakeholder and an important part of sustainability tourism. So cannot be ignored. So it's not much different, but the thing is, unfortunately, sustainability tourism has not been given that much importance. But post-COVID, we are seeing that it has becoming more and more. It's being talked about, and people are, can see what happens if the things like COVID happens and there is a fallout on the tourism sector and the dollars go down. So, and we have seen very good examples in Southeast Asia. We have Thailand, and we have, other, like probably Sri Lanka also, and where, how if you don't have yourself ready and become more sustainable, then in the long run, you won't be able to meet certain roadblocks. So that is there. And domestically also in India, certain states, I really, I'm very glad that Dr. Sarangi brought up the case of Odisha, and Odisha is a very model case in India who's taking up the, in tourism sector and helping the locals. So, bringing in, and to Orissa, mostly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it mostly enjoys the domestic tourists. and more than the international, the more international tourists go to Goa and all, where it's more marketed and more, and some bit of greenwashing also goes in there. But in Odisha, that's where, the domestic tourists go, the locals get help, the locals, the livelihood is generated, and it also, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there is a blue flag beach in Puri, which is one of the first blue flag beaches in India, which has been certified as one of the first blue flag beaches in India. So it is also at an international level. So sustainability tourism should be given, everybody, all stakeholders should be given equal importance. And then that's where they will come in, and they will join hands. And because we cannot leave anybody behind and just have tourists come in and um, take care of your sustainability needs, by putting in more
That's true.
funds and all. Yeah. And your
Thank
second
you.
question, I hope I covered it.
Indranil, no, we do not have time for the second question. We have to move on to Philip's presentation. So thank you for that. If there's time, maybe you can answer the second question later on. Let's move on to Dr. Philip Varghese. He's in Japan. Are you in Japan, Philip, now?
Yes, yes, hi.
So he is a postdoctoral fellow and attached to International University in Japan. He's presented a thesis on political implications on tourism development. So we would like you to talk about that element, which we have not seen many panels featuring. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks to the organizers and all of the panelists. From my association with tourism studies, from the social science perspective, started from 2017. So from there, I'll share a couple of points. First point is to discuss the nature of tourism development itself in the first place. So in the literature, if you see, as many of you have been saying, there is this economic aspect to it. It has been understood as the engine of growth, and which is premised upon these arguments of revenue generation and employment generation. But this, by 1940s and 50s, got sidelined, and over the period of time, there is various theories touching upon socio, cultural, environmental aspects came about, and they have highlighted the issues and challenges that actually exist in this tourism industry or tourism development process. So within this, these have given or highlighted various aspects, but again, there is an dearth in understanding the political nature of it. That is where I would like to add one or two points here. This means that, as Indranil sir already highlighted, there is this governance issue associated here. That is, when we say it is political, that means there is governance frameworks, and grassroots level organizations become extremely important in this. So decentralization of power through a devolution of funds, functionaries, and functions to the local bodies play a significant role in this tourism entire business. And concerns growing from tourism industry is for more and maximum, more and more relaxation. In India, if you see, the industry is already putting enough pressure to transfer tourism as a subject from the state list to the concurrent list, whereas the central government can start legislating policies and laws with regard to tourism. So that looks like a good thing, but it becomes a single window clearance for many of the norms, regulations, restrictions at the grassroots level or even at the state level. So powers of local bodies gets diminished in that process. That having said that, there is also a rosy picture attempt to paint a rosy picture of tourism, what we see, by terming it as a political activity, that there is trickle down which happens and it will affect all sections of the society. Here we also have to understand that tourism is just like any other industry. There is child labor, there is sexual exploitation, there is gender issues, there are labor issues. There is, just like how you try to paint it as a clean industry, but that is not the reality in this. And environmental issues, that is where I would like to add the second point, that is the connection with biodiversity, that biodiversity and tourism, that just like any other business, tourism is extremely dependent upon biodiversity. It's not just because the immediate use of natural resources, because everything becomes like the gaze. The product itself is coming out of the gaze of mountains and lakes and backwaters and beaches, all that. But directly or indirectly, there are these supply chains, value chains, regulatory systems, financing mechanisms. All this indirectly or directly impact the dependence or raise the dependence on biodiversity. That is the tourism's dependence on biodiversity. And irrespective of the size of the enterprise, small scale, mid range, or global MNCs, all focus or all has dependencies and impacts on biodiversity. So one thing what we register and understand now is the declining of biodiversity and business risk associated with biodiversity. And biodiversity loss has been recognized as one of the you know uh, uh, increasing phenomena worldwide. The fifth edition of Global Risk Report, released by World Economic Forum, also notes this particular aspect, that biodiversity loss as one of the major global risks with the potential of systemic failures for future. And to make it worse, the current trend is that 44 trillion US dollar of economic value generation appears to be moderately or highly dependent on nature. And this makes the entire biodiversity loss and the ecosystem degeneration vulnerable in itself, and also the risk it poses to the businesses altogether. But tourism, as it is completely premised upon the biodiversity, or its dependency or impact is much more, so the risk factor is much more in this. With this problematizing, I would stop, and if there is some questions, I would respond to that.
Thank you. Sharp on the 5 minutes time, Dr. Philip. The question I'm asking the panel, whether the panel would have a question to Dr. Philip. Would the panel have a question to Dr. Philip? Okay. So I will ask you a question, but before that, I would like to thank you for bringing this negative aspect of tourism into the discussion, leaving aside the politics of representing tourism as a rosy, positive, all positive industry. It has also negatives, and Manisha, Sanjeev, both of them are also with me on this ICRT. Manisha mentioned about Professor Harold Goodwin. His way of saying, introducing tourism, is to say tourism is like fire. It can cook your meal or burn down your house. And that's a very simple statement that can, show the gravity of tourism. So I have a question, since it's like you mentioned about the political aspects involved in tourism. So you also mentioned about the trickle-down effect. It gives this rosy picture. But I think some of us who are involved in tourism like to think it has this, it grows to the grassroots, and it does help in economic situations of, it is a very pro-poor, inclusive development tool. Not because of anything else, but mainly because the trends, that global tourism trends, the way they are heading for authentic experiences. They are not, no more you would have guests who would want to go and stay in an air-conditioned hotel and in a beach front for 14 days to stay put in that particular hotel. But here, the trends are to go and explore, go to new areas, and especially after COVID, I think that is a trend. So do you have any response to that statement, Dr. Philip.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, I just give the other side of it and going, I mean, from the literature I was sharing, but the idea and also my postdoc also is an attempt to look at the best practices. I have made visits to Western Ghats, I study Wayanad, I also gone to Nagaland. So, the best way of looking at it is to, as I said, is it to connect maximum with the local community, and that is what many of you are actually working with also. In Wayanad, we can see there is this, I can cite an example of one network called Pratyasha, that is a local set of homestay providers along with tourism enterprise and the panchayat. They come together and they have strategized or planning and participatory approach they have adopted, and they are working towards finding nature positive solutions to global issues, so at the local level. But then but they also face some setback because of during the COVID time, and they have lost momentum. But there are various initiatives across India. You can see various initiatives which is rooted at the grassroots level and supported, very well supported by uh, uh, the local self-government. So the idea is not that it is completely negative, that's not the idea, but although we have to understand that side of tourism and manage the resources, because it is heavily dependent upon the biodiversity, and biodiversity is on a decline. So that is the major
Thank you.
point there. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. On that aspect, I would like to leave your session talking about the newest concept of regenerative tourism. It's not about doing the correct thing, it's also going back and rectifying the bad things that you have done. So that is getting quite popular. I think that's a new term coined, like the responsible tourism, sustainable tourism. In a few years to come, the buzzword would be regenerative tourism. And in particular, responding to your biodiversity, everybody is looking at like a net positive, like leaving everything we do, even if you walk on grass, there's a negative, something gets damaged. So you're talking about using it as a conservation tool to get revenue, to use it as a conservation tool. So that aspect opportunity is there in tourism. I think we've had an excellent mix of topics today. And moving on, just there's a panel. There's a question about too much crowd should not precisely be correct to sustain. That means too much crowd should not be there to sustain ecosystem of that natural view or natural environment. So tourism should have also restrictions. This is from Dr. Subir Kumar. Definitely tourism should have restrictions. I'm sure if anyone else in the panel want to talk about restrictions. So like a lot of destinations are now stopping the count of heads, number of tourist arrivals. They're looking at value and they're looking at the yield, the tourism income, sometimes also limiting the number of tourism and making it more exclusive in order to protect the biodiversity and the natural environment. Then I think our time, we have just done one hour altogether. I would like to leave this discussion with your expertise reaching everybody on maybe simply by from your own field of expertise. If you can say one thing that in order to make a better tomorrow using responsible tourism, what would it be? Maybe I can start by saying I think it's storytelling. Maybe one or two words you can use. For me, it's about storytelling. I think if we are to promote responsible tourism and in order to make a better world tomorrow, it has to be this storytelling aspect. We are not doing enough of that, especially this part of the southern part of the world. And moving on to Indranil. Indranil, would you like to say something? anybody in the panel, just one thing that we can leave the discussion
Yeah,
with.
storytelling is a brilliant idea, I would think. Other than that, I think it should be about, you know, accountability. So if you have accountability, whether it's the tourists who are accountable or the different management or the stakeholders in the tourism industry, along with the government being a major stakeholder there. So I would use the one word accountability because, yeah, storytelling does help, but then, the nature of the beast here in this part of the world, if you don't have things accountable, then the things don't get done. So accountability.
Thank you. Moving on to Sanjeev, Dr. Sanjeev.
Yeah, thanks. So I would leave with two words actually, that is the coexistence and harmony. Because for me, for the thriving future, to have the responsible tourism in place, so harmony with coexistence is play an important role. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a lovely idea. Rashmi?
Since it's gone from 1 to 2 words, I'll go with 3. But
That's
what I would
fine.
like to, what I would like to say is, I mean, there's this thing in forests that we do, right? Like when we go for hikes, we don't leave anything behind. And I think that is a very important idea, just to say not to leave anything behind. So I'll move the focus back to the individual as opposed to the systems and structures, and speak for the idea that if you are in a position to travel or go somewhere, what do you not leave behind, or how much do you not leave behind, is the idea, and the answer should be as little as possible or nothing. I think that would be an ideal way to travel responsibly.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you. Manisha?
Yes, I think, from the perspective of responsible tourism, I would say that, collective responsibility, I think it's time for all of us to come back, come together. So no working in solos, because I think that really won't have the impact. So I would leave it there that, everything, whether it's government or private or any other initiatives, have to come together to take responsibility. I mean, sharing benefits is one side, but sharing responsibility is critical. And I would, endorse what Indraneej is saying, is that there is no mechanism to actually do impact studies. It should be taken up very seriously, but everybody should be accountable and should be able to give a result. So I think that's where the gap is still, which we need to fill. So I think that is where I leave the discussion.
Thank you, Manisha. Very relevant. Thank you. And lastly, Dr. Philippe.
Yeah, so I think mainstreaming biodiversity in the tourism business to achieve global goals such as SDGs, Paris Agreement, Kunming, Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So I think global goals are there, but then you have to mainstream biodiversity into the all businesses for that matter, because businesses all are dependent on profit. Maximizing profit is the only sole objective of businesses. So keeping that aside, mainstreamizing biodiversity aspects and goals into the tourism business. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Philippe. That is quite a range of interesting areas to focus on. Well, we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Indranil, Dr. Sanjeev, Rashmi, Manisha, and Dr. Philippe, and Avani from RISE. I thank RISE Summit for organizing this excellent panel, and I hope many of the others can view this later on, and this will be a wonderful exposure for students who are learning about responsible sustainable tourism. This discussion is a multi-angle discussion with experts in the field who've been working in responsible tourism for a long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharmari.
Thank you, Sharmari. Thank you, everyone. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, everybody, for
Thank you,
joining.
everyone.